And here we are again on Main Street. Once again, I must remind you, not Gary Allen. Gary, for the next week and two, is going to be out taking care of some dental ouchies. We wish him a very, very speedy recovery. I'm here, the Robert Q. Lewis of the 21st century, sitting in for Gary. And today we are going to have a lot of fun because I'm going to have a lot of fun. And I'm going to have a lot of fun because I have one of my closest friends on the planet with me as a guest today. He is truly an icon of radio broadcasting. He is humorous, a raconteur, very intelligent. I love him and his beautiful wife, Marcy, a lot. And would you all at home, would you snap like this as you're watching, as I introduce my buddy, Mark Sudock?
Good day. Nice to be with you, Geoffrey. Hi, everybody.
Yeah, how about that? So, you can, if you're watching, send us comments and say hi or ask questions. We encourage that. And in the meantime, we're just going to have a party here, Mark and I, and you're welcome to join us because I'm in a party mood. Mark is undergoing what is one of the most stressful things anyone can do. He is completely redoing his house. And I love that you cleaned up your office so we could have our party today.
That's true.
Appreciate
this is cleaned up. For God's sakes, this is cleaned up. Nobody should do what we're doing. Nobody should remodel their home.
Why don't you very briefly tell us what's going on?
Well, this started in June because we had an upstairs master bath commode that was backing up a lot. So, I budgeted my $250 to have the rooter guys come out and de-root the toilet. And it turned out that led to a problem with the main line blockage all the way downstairs out to the street. And so that $250 turned into $28,000.
Yikes.
And then it turned out that there were other problems with an upstairs bath that was built in 68. It was just easy to trip into and out of the tub, and also we had to remodel that, and termite damage this year down where we live. There are a lot of termite infestations house to house. So one thing led to another, and that $250, we're up to about $160,000 now of renovation work. And it all started because of one damn toilet clog upstairs. Good morning, good afternoon. It's very nice to be with you.
$160,000 worth of damage.
And the worst part of it all is this is my little world, my little environment where the show that Geoffrey and I do together, we'll talk about that in a minute. This is where I do the show, but it's also storage central for everything in the other parts of the house that had to move away. This is becoming really boring. It's so nice to be with you.
Well, let's go right to what you were just talking about, the shows. There's two shows, actually, we need to talk about. One is your long-running, iconic show about Mr. Sinatra, which I just love. I love what you do on it. I love the music you play. I love you. And then you've taken your iconicness and sprinkled it on me, and you're the producer of our show, Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella. So we work together. We are dear friends. How did the Sinatra show start? What was the germ of that?
First of all, I have to thank my mom. When I was just, a small guy growing up, she had his music playing in the house all the time, particularly an album called Songs for Swingin' Lovers. And I was mesmerized by what he was doing and what Nelson Riddle was doing for him. This was in the formative stages of that, I'll use your word, that iconic relationship. And for me, I just found myself transfixed by all of that music. So coming up as a teen of basically of the 60s, other people were listening to Judy Collins and Cat Stevens, and that's all fine and great, but it didn't resonate the way Sinatra's music did. By 71, I was working at a radio station, and they let me start doing my own Sinatra series. And so it's around 1971 that I started doing those shows. What I can tell you is when I launched what is now known as the Sinatra Songbook, that was 1974, the driving force for me was do a show that I would want to listen to as a consumer. And for me, the driving through line was this question: what was all the fuss about? Now, if you grew up as a peer of Mr. Sinatra in terms of age, you already knew what all the fuss was about. But I wanted to do a show that aimed its focus at younger audiences who weren't around for it all the first time around. So for them, if I could answer the question, what was all the fuss about? I'm doing a program with purpose. So each week, whether it's my commentary or that of his friends and collaborators, the goal was the same: focus on what made his creativity unique and then demonstrate it the best way possible, and that is playing the music. But always in that context of what was the fuss all about? And that is the way we continue with it today.
I must admit and confess to our friends who are watching that I was a listener of that show in the 1970s and fell in love with the show and you. Thank you. It was one of those wonderful joys of being in our business that I got to meet you finally and let you know how much I loved your work and that we became such close friends because of Mr. Sinatra. So let me ask you a Sinatra question.
Yes.
On our show, we have devoted or will devote, depending on when you're listening to this, an hour of Ella rocking out, singing things, covering 60s and 70s pop music. Now, Mr. Sinatra did some of that. I don't think he devoted entire albums to it, but he recorded things like Downtown and his own sort of soft rock, Something Stupid. And what did you think of his attempts at trying to be relevant in the rock and 60s and disco 70s?
There were moments, in my humble opinion, where it worked well, but more often than not, I thought these were misfires. I think that were Frank here today, he would say, that's fair. That's a fair assessment. He always referred to show business with capital letters about the word business. It's show business. And the goal is to remain relevant, as you can well appreciate, Jeff. And that meant stepping away from Cole Porter and Irving Berlin and the Gershwins and trying to relate to the next generation of songwriters. And at that point in time, now we're talking the 60s, songwriters were performing their own material. That was the big evolution in my mind from all that had preceded. You'd have these great songwriters, some of whom I just mentioned, and then you'd have practitioners like Frank or Ella, and a long list of others who had very successful careers singing the work of composers who were not necessarily performers. Now in the 60s and the 70s and to this very day, everybody does their own material rather than necessarily making a career covering the material of other people. So when that happens today, the performances are very heartfelt because they're very organic. These are the people that wrote the material by and large. I think that was a rough fit for Sinatra generally, with some notable exceptions. And one of them was just about his last theme album, and that was Watertown, which was written by Charles Colello and great Jake Holmes and other wonderful creators.
I'm going to interrupt you for 1 second, just in case, because not everybody is as well educated as I am. Why don't you let our folks know what Watertown is?
Watertown was actually going to be a film project, but they never followed that concept through to fruition. But it is the story, a musical, which turned out just to be an album, a record album, story of a guy whose relationship with his wife went sour. She left, but he always imagined that she'd come to her senses and come home. And the musical story that is Watertown is the man's life as he copes with her absence and his prayer that she comes back. I don't want to play out the whole story for you because it's all done so brilliantly in the music, but it is an unfulfilled wish. I will tell you that much. She never does come back. But it is very dramatic and quite mature. Reprise Records, Frank's label, was frustrated. This was so unique from all of the albums Sinatra had done prior to Watertown. They didn't know how to market it. They just didn't know how to promote this kind of Sinatra project. So it really fell on deaf ears, and Watertown found its way into the budget bin early on. And that's sad. It's a wonderful piece of music and a great story and brilliantly performed. But there it was in the bargain bins, and you can still find Watertown now. Highly recommended.
Let's talk about Mr. Sinatra as a storyteller as opposed to as a singer. I've heard so many people through the years in discussing his work. Well, he didn't really have that great of a voice. Oh, I prefer so-and-so as a singer. And I think when I hear people talking about the quality of his voice, they're kind of missing the point. He had a gorgeous voice, but it wasn't just quality of voice. It was his ability to tell a story, to share an emotion, and to make the lyrics mean something to me. And I've always said it's a triumvirate. It has to be a story. There has to be a song. It has to be a singer who can let us know what the intent of the author was, and then it has to be the right arrangement, because you can have a great song and a great singer and a lousy arrangement, and it kind of just sits there. Mr. Sinatra surrounded himself with the best arrangers, most importantly Nelson Riddle, but Gordon Jenkins, Don Costa, people like that, Billy May. Where do you think he ranks as a storyteller?
As a storyteller, best of the best. I think I'll say again, if Frank were here with us today, he would say, I agree with you. I think that I could think of contemporaries, me speaking now as Sinatra. He would mention Vic Damone or Perry Como, maybe Dick Haymes, a long list of performers who Frank would concede had greater vocal instruments than he possessed. But as I've often said, Frank Sinatra was the best friend a lyric ever had, because that's where the song really resided. An important melody, it's crucial. But if you don't have a story to tell, and hopefully an epic one, you really don't have anything. So for that reason, he hung around the works of the Johnny Mercers and the Cole Porters and the Gershwins and Irving Berlin and a few others that are slipping my mind right now, because there was so much pathos and sincerity in the lyrics that they created. And that was home for Sinatra. He had material to work with. But it is the actor that Frank was that makes his material stand the test of time so brilliantly. That was his great strength. And to take it a step further, wherever possible, Sinatra, the biographer, chose material that reflected his own life experience. I think he was a good enough actor to be able to say, even if I didn't live the message of this particular song, I can sell it and make you believe it. But if it was a story and emotion that reverberated through his life, it meant even more. And you find that in all of the torch song ballad-based albums that Frank did in the 50s. I don't think his life was simple. It was rather complex. And I think he found an avenue, a cathartic path of expression in those songs of sadness.
I have a question about that.
Yeah.
So, he reverberates his own feelings, experiences through his songs. His voice is his instrument for doing it. And I'm going to ask you to make an assumption because no one can know for sure why.
Mm-hmm.
Early in his life, he was very thin. He swam to increase his breath control. He worked on his style. But there comes a point in the mid-50s where we can tell, we who love the music, we who listen a lot, Mr. Sinatra is smoking a little too much. He's drinking a little too much. Not for his personal life. I'm not saying he was an alcoholic, but it's beginning to show in his voice. Why do you assume or presume or wonder why he allowed that? Why he didn't say, wait a minute, my whole life is about what I can produce from here. Why didn't you take better care of it?
This is the complex personality that is Frank Sinatra. In the 50s, Nelson Riddle famously said, Frank Sinatra's got voice to burn. Where everybody else would come up short, he still got a lot left in the bank and could deliver. Maybe, and you're right, this is me presuming, maybe in those years Frank said, I'll go on forever. I've got the instrument, I've got the passion. This stuff is just not of concern to me. So if I have Jack Daniels tonight, and maybe even before this session, the product will still be there. I'll be able to deliver the goods. So when you take this complex life force, who in his way, I believe, would tell you, live it all to the fullest, it is that blend, that recipe that made him who he was. One of his artistic imperfections may well have been that he didn't better care for his instrument. But singing was just one of his passions. Living life was a passion there. And it, in its own way, even with a voice that got raspier through the years, it's part of the fabric of the guy. And the payoff is that the performances, by and large, are convincing. A thought. By one author's measure, Frank has recorded about 1,400 titles in studio recordings. And if you were to look at the totality of it, Jeff, I think you would say that the percentage of duds is incredibly small. That he was able to go out there, even at the end of the career, where frankly other people would have said, it's not there, I got to stop. He's still out there and singing with passion and conviction through it all, and takes literally the lyrics of My Way and
I was just thinking that.
Exactly. So it's this imperfect guy who took all of his strengths and vulnerabilities and just, I hate to say this, did it his way. He simply did.
Why do you think the whole ring-a-ding-ding Rat Pack thing becomes so popular? You and I both know that part of his life, that time of his life, was short. The Rat Pack was not 20 and 30 years. It was a short period of time while Frank Sinatra and Dean Martin and Sammy Davis and Peter Lawford were making movies together and appearing in Las Vegas together at the same time. But you have a man who was in his 40s and 50s bragging about the wild partying and the women and the liquor and maybe a little allusion to drugs, and America just lapped it up like it was sweet cream. Right at the same time as Elvis Presley and the Beatles are all pushing through with their kind of music. Why do you think America loved that so much?
It was lightning in the bottle, number one. It was a touchstone to a youthful time for people who were starting to graduate into middle age. It was in part due to the fact that these entertainers were the best of the best in those years. I think, and here's the proof of the pudding. There are endless legends-like shows out there now where other people are doing the Rat Pack. Same material, but in my humble opinion, it's doomed at the start. These guys were so organically made for that and were such good friends. It all related in their performance. So you've got them firing on all cylinders in the absolute apex of their careers. And it was the swinging jet set early 60s. It all just combined perfectly. And then, as you said, it only lasted maybe 3-4 years. By 1965,
it was over.
It was pretty much over. And it launched it around 1960, toward the end of 60. They were making Ocean's 11 in Las Vegas. Jack Ann Trotter, who programmed acts at the Sands, the foremost hotel of its day, would have Frank or Dean or Sammy in the main room, the Copa room. And one of the guys said, I might just walk out on your show and make a surprise appearance. And it worked. And on another night, say it was Sammy's night, you never knew. Frank might walk out, Dean might walk out. And the marquees of the day started to read Sammy Davis Jr., maybe Dean, maybe Frank, or Frank Sinatra. And it would say, maybe Sammy, maybe Dean. And it became the hottest ticket in town. A friend of mine who was the casino boss at the Sands said, once Trotter realized that he had lightning in the bottle, they said, let's book this as an event, which they called the Summit. And all of a sudden, the hotel was sold out 6 months ahead of the engagement. And you couldn't, the Hollywood executives couldn't get bookings to come out and see the show. You may remember the Copa room, sat 500-600 people?
Yeah, 550 people.
Intimate by today's concert standards. So finding a seat was very, very tough. You had to be Lucille Ball, or you had to be a crony of Frank's or Dean's, or you're not going to get into the show. And how good was the show? Pick up the album Sinatra at the Sands. It was recorded in that general period of time, and that's the best way to hear lightning in the bottle. That's how it worked. And you're right. 3, 4, 5 years at the most, and they were all on to their own individual careers again.
When I talk to young people about this kind of music, inevitably, the Rat Pack, or Dean Martin was the one we all like. He was the cool one. They know his music better than they know Frank's music. It's very interesting to me, because you and I are almost the same age. Growing up in the 60s and 70s, whatever you want, dear, you're the guest. You're whatever age you'd like to be today.
Let me twist my mustache again.
He's making fun of my long mustache. But kids today, young people today, see the Rat Pack completely differently. They think it went on and on and on and on. And they look at Dean as being the cool guy, the bigger star. I don't get it. I don't understand it. But that seems to be the impression today.
Dean's cool stands the test of time, doesn't it? And in those shows, by the way, it's Dean who's the most entertaining of the three.
Oh, yeah.
They're all super talents, but I think Dean's time with Jerry groomed him to be a great solo comic. He was a natural at it back in '46 when he teamed up with Jerry, and against all of Lewis's zaniness, the counterpoint was Dean's coolness, which he simply cultivated in the years going forward. But there's a great Rat Pack concert that I would recommend to people. It was recorded for television as a fundraiser for Dismas House. I beg your pardon, which was a charity based down in St. Louis. And today, as far as I know, it's the only surviving film of the Rat Pack at work. Beg your pardon. When I saw this film the first time, I think Dean comes out first, then Sammy, and finally Frank, and then all of them together. But I'm sitting with a Sinatra buddy, and we're watching this concert from '65, and we're looking at each other and we're saying, Dean is stealing the show. He's so incredible. He's damn funny, and in complete control and in complete charge, cultivating that under the influence persona that he used on stage. The other guys, fantastic, great, each at what they do. But Dean walked away with that night. Can't recommend it to you more than just about anything else.
It's an interesting concert because Joey Bishop, who was the comedian who played with these guys a lot, could not make it. He was shooting his own series at the time, and Johnny Carson comes in, and they treat him like he is not wanted there particularly.
Was that your impression?
Well, yes, it is my impression.
Johnny was an 11th hour fill-in. Joey actually threw his back out and couldn't make the trip to St. Louis. They called Johnny, who was still doing the show up in New York, The Tonight Show, and he flew down on a moment's notice pretty much and took Joey's place. So it was, I mean, here's three other guys, Frank, Dean, Sammy, who know each other like the back of their hands. They've got what seems like spontaneous repartee. It's all pretty much scripted, and they just push the pieces around the checkerboard to suit the moment. By the way, material by and large written by Joey Bishop. But that was the circumstance. So at the last moment, Johnny graciously comes in, helps them out, because that concert is not just those three guys working independently and together, but I'm trying to remember her name. Well, I know that Trini Lopez and a couple of other people perform before you get to the classic Rat Pack guys. So Johnny comes in and MCs Tonight Show style to tie it all together. But yeah, he's the odd guy out on this one, isn't he?
He is. By the way, there is a film. It's not as nearly as good a film where Joey Bishop is doing, and you can see how the same material, the same jokes. The only difference, other than they treat Joey better and Joey fits in better, is that the only spontaneous person is Dean. And this is something, by the way, folks who are watching this, Gary Allen, the star of this show, who is out sick today and next week, is watching. He had two comments. I've been ignoring them because I've been enjoying what Mark has said so much. One is he said that Mr. Sinatra brought an inner soul to music like Tony Bennett. And the other one was they didn't like being called the Rat Pack.
No, they preferred anything. They preferred being referred to as the Summit.
Well, the Rat Pack thing came from Lauren Bacall, because originally this group was Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall and Judy Garland and Sid Luft and Frank Sinatra and anyone else they cared to include. That kind of morphed after Mr. Bogart passed away. Lauren Bacall was part of it until she and Mr. Sinatra got engaged and then got unengaged, and then she was no longer a part of that. So the Rat Pack was a name she gave to it in jest that kind of stuck after she was no longer around.
The Holmby Hills Rat Pack.
Yes, because their homes were all in that part of
Beverly Hills. Yeah, exactly.
You know
that Joey Bishop, he put out a autobiography that he titled "Mouse in the Rat Pack."
I can see why.
He felt he was the odd man out, and I think not so secretively was frustrated by the relative success that Frank, Dean, and Sammy enjoyed, and he was kind of the fourth banana, if you will, but way down the roster. And yet,
meanwhile, Joey got his own sitcom for 4 seasons, and then his own talk show on ABC. So he didn't do too badly.
Did not do too bad. I couldn't agree more. An amazing artist, Frank, and that goes for Dean and Sammy too.
You know that I was very good friends with William Asher. Bill was the man who produced and directed President Kennedy's the night before he was inaugurated television special that never got seen. Mm-hmm. And I have a copy of it. Bill gave me a copy of it. It's a brilliant show. Mr. Sinatra produced not the television part, but he produced the music. He got all of these people. I mean, Ethel Merman, Ella Fitzgerald, Nat King Cole, Betty Davis,
Jimmy Shelley.
The list just goes on and on and on. Not Dean Martin, not Sammy Davis Jr., because Joe Kennedy said you can't have a black. Not because he was black, but because he was marrying a white woman.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But yeah. Bill said backstage with these guys was wild.
I have a question. I didn't know that there was an issue with Dean's appearance. Why?
He didn't like doing these charity things. He didn't like working and not getting paid. And I'm not sure Mr. Martin was a Democrat. I don't know he was. I've never heard anyone discuss Dean Martin's politics anywhere. So I've got no idea where he lies. But or it could have been because Sammy wasn't coming, Dean wasn't coming. I'm not quite sure what the story was.
I don't know.
But the stories about traveling with the group, the summit, anytime there was more than one, or even just traveling with Mr. Sinatra, things got really wild. A wildness I almost don't want to talk about on the air, involving President Kennedy, involving Air Force One, involving Peter Lawford, who, according to, but now Peter Lawford was one of Bill Asher's closest friends. And we don't talk about Peter much today, but he is also part of this Rat Pack thing. He's appearing with them in Las Vegas and in films. And Peter was producing his own films at that point as well. But they say that Peter was just Captain Cocaine and giving everybody the extra boost, the wacky dust. And in all of your years in doing research and talking to the people who worked with him, did you ever hear of this kind of wildness, or is that only around President Kennedy?
I don't think it was limited to JFK. That connection obviously started because Frank, who in those years was a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, had great admiration for John Kennedy and thought he was the right man for that point in our history, campaigned fervently for JFK, and they became close. JFK's, I don't want to spend too much time with you on this, but JFK latched on to Sinatra's lifestyle. Not that he wasn't a playboy in his own right, but there was a certain fraternal connection, I think, between the two in those years. It's been documented and written about ad nauseum, but I think that is at the base of the connection between them. So, Frank in later years would be, not too many years later, actually shooting a film when he learns of the assassination. And they were filming at a cemetery. The film was Robin and the Seven Hoods. And they were shooting scenes at a cemetery. When word comes around that the president had been shot, everybody's in shock and wants to just pack it in for the day. But they were, I guess troopers is the right word. They stayed, they filmed their agenda of the day and simply worked through it. But I'm going off on a tangent, I'm sorry to say, but for the rest of that 1963 production, Robin and the Seven Hoods, it was all under the cloud of the Kennedy assassination. So you might think about that as you watch the film next time round, because it was foremost in our minds as a nation as they were making the picture.
And also, don't you think that Mr. Sinatra's association with the president, and I guess we have to take 30 seconds to let folks know there's a piece of the puzzle we haven't discussed, that once he was made president, Mr. Sinatra offered him his Palm Springs compound for a vacation, and in fact invested heavily, like tens of thousands of dollars, to make it president proof. And once again, the president's father, Joseph Kennedy, said, no, he's got ties to the mafia. And to rub salt on the wound of not coming, went to Palm Springs anyway with Bing Crosby. And that after that, Mr. Sinatra became a Republican, vocally supporting Republican politicians. And
it was about a 5 or 6 year spread between the JFK snub and the yes.
Bill Asher told me that Peter Lawford was never the same after that. He said Peter's almost entire self-worth was so wrapped around being the brother-in-law of the president of the United States that after JFK was assassinated, Peter just did this downward spiral of drugs and alcohol. He divorced the president's sister, and he died a relatively young man, if not directly from drugs and alcohol, from what those things did to his body. And I think it changed Mr. Sinatra as well. I think that was maybe a bell ringing that, I can't ring a ding so much anymore. Maybe I need to get, and that was the end of the ring a ding ding thing. He began to get more like a Hugh Hefner thing, where he was just this master playboy, but it was different.
I hadn't thought really before this moment about a parallel, but America changed. It lost a lot of its innocence with that assassination, much like more of the nation's innocence went out the window on 9/11. The world changed to not go back to what it was. So for those of us, well, you and I were certainly around when JFK was taken from us, but for those who came along after that fact, a parallel would have been how the nation changed 20 years ago. And preceding us, Jeff, I think people who were alive and thriving in 41 when Pearl Harbor took place, the bombing, the world changed for those people as well. Isn't it interesting that these are 20-year, more or less, spreads in time, in years, between these three major events? Perhaps coincidence, but that seems to be the case.
Gary is sending me a message here. We're talking about Dean Martin and his politics. He said, according to his son, Ricky, he stayed out of the political area. Ricky was a good friend of his. And Ricky passed way too young as well. Dean and I know this is not the Rat Pack show today. We're supposed to be
Yes.
talking about Mr. Sinatra. Let's get the Rat Pack over and go into other areas. But also, Dean was never the same after Dino died. His son Dino. People I know who were very close to him, it's like he just gave up caring. He
Yeah.
just gave up. He didn't want to perform. He didn't want to put his teeth in. He'd go to restaurants without teeth and want to sit by himself near the kitchen and he just never got over it. And I know Desi Jr. also, when both Dino and Ricky died, just devastated that these beautiful, young, talented men were no more. And I imagine all of the people we're talking about, including Mr. Sinatra, must have been devastated by it. Do you?
I can't imagine.
I'm going to make a left-hand turn here because we're getting very deep and dark. And I promised our friends a party, and the hors d'oeuvres we're serving are bitter. Let's sweeten this up just a little bit. Do you have a favorite Sinatra album?
That's hard, but I would have to say the album that impressed me so much when I was so young, Songs for Swinging Lovers, stands the test of time. That's surprising in one way, because for me, my favorite Sinatra albums are ballad albums, the more dramatic albums. He does them all terrifically, but the appeal of Songs for Swinging Lovers is it's the first real potent connection for me between Frank Sinatra and Nelson Riddle, who as a team made each other better, who as a team became, I thought, one artist. Sinatra worked so well with the names that you mentioned, Don Costa, Billy May, Axel Stordahl, Don Costa, did I say Don?
Yes.
All of these great people, and they were wonderful pairings. But when Frank and Nelson performed, when they collaborated, I always thought the voice was one voice, and that was unique. The conversation between vocalist and instrumentalist was a game changer. It actually changed the way this music was interpreted for all time, right through this day. The Bublé product is so influenced by what Frank did with Nelson. And while some might argue it didn't start on the album Songs for Swinging Lovers, for me, personally, it congealed there, and it remains a great program of music. There's a great little side story, if I might throw it in. When the album was recorded, the suits at Capitol said, again, I'll use the term lightning in a bottle, this is going to be great. This is a can't miss. We want to add 3 more cuts to the album. Record albums back then, traditionally 12 titles. No, we want 15 this time round. So word got back to Sinatra, who turned around and picked up the telephone and said, Nelson, we're in the studio tomorrow. We need 3 more arrangements. The night before. So Nelson was up all night long arranging 3 new cuts for this now 15 title project. And as late as almost 8 p.m. on record night, Nelson's wife is driving him into the studio from, I believe, Malibu, into the Capitol Tower, while Nelson's in the back seat writing the last chart so that they can literally hand it to the copyist once he walked through the door. And that last minute little something turned out to be I've Got You Under My Skin.
You read my mind. Thank you so much for the perfect blending. What is it about I've Got You Under My Skin? If you would ask almost any Sinatra fan, what is your favorite Sinatra song, or what is the most iconic thing he ever recorded? I think 9 times out of 10, you're going to hear, you may hear that My Way was their favorite song, or New York, New York. But what's the best? It's I've Got You Under My Skin. Why? Why do you think?
Oh, I've got answers for you. When it comes to your answers, I'm full of it. Okay, starting with Nelson's arrangement. Nelson composed to the rhythm of the heart, as he would say in his biography. So when you think about 50 beats per minute or thereabouts, that's what's going on with I've Got You Under My Skin. Nelson was a great secretary, as Frank would call him. And the structure of I've Got You Under My Skin is according to Frank's notations to Nelson. It's exactly what he wanted the song to do, to have this slow build to this explosive instrumental break in the center of the piece, and then back to Frank to pay it off and then end quietly. Because, as Nelson would write again, he said, songs shouldn't have a big finish. They should punch 2/3 of the way through like great sex. Build to this explosive moment, and then you come down. All of those things are going on in this arrangement. The structure of it responds instrumentally to what Frank's doing vocally. So there's this marvelous back and forth between the two, and a perfect reason of why the gelling of Sinatra and Nelson resulted in a performance from one voice. Those are my reasons.
Those are great reasons. Do you have a favorite Sinatra song?
That would be one of them. There's a couple that I would mention that are favorites that a lot of people don't know. There's a incredibly sad ballad called Forget to Remember. It was done in the 60s. And Frank said it's so sad, and for him mentally draining, he decided he would never perform it publicly. It wouldn't become part of the act because it was too much of a downer and exhausting for him to sing. Not vocally exhausting, but emotionally exhausting. So they recorded it with, I think, Don Costa in the 60s, and then put it on the shelf. And if you want to consult the title, that's where you go. But all of the songs in Swingin' Lovers are favorites of mine. And beyond that, name a ballad album, and I'll find a favorite on there for you.
As an album, I'm very partial to the Jobim album.
As they said in Star Wars, you have chosen wisely.
And for whatever
No, that was that was the Raiders of the Lost Ark, I think, or one of those films when they found Christ's cup.
Yes,
you've chosen wisely, and you have, Jeff. Yes, it's a masterwork of an album.
And for whatever reason, I am just tickled pink by the Coffee Song.
Recorded a couple of times by Sinatra. The first time in the 40s. It's a little the 40s version might be considered politically incorrect today, as he does his a Mexican accent through portions of it. But it doesn't really matter. The version recorded with Billy May in the 60s is a runaway success. I'm pausing here because now I'm trying to remember, was it Billy May or was it Johnny Mandel? You get a little older and you start forgetting things. Doesn't matter.
I do believe it's Billy May.
Well, that recording, whoever gets the credit for arranging it, that just fires on every possible cylinder, and it's terrific.
Gary is blinking at us here that his two favorites are "Fly Me to the Moon" and "It Was a Very Good Year."
Yeah, I can't argue with Gary. I mean, I can't. Those are wonderful titles, and again, perennial favorites. "Fly Me to the Moon" worked.
Do you think Mr. Sinatra was taking any kind of a risk? Because he built himself up, the boy crooner and then the ring-a-ding-ding guy, in doing things like "It Was a Very Good Year" and "My Way," where he is singing about getting older. Was it a risk for him, or was it just a brilliance?
No, this is the artist in Sinatra. He wasn't concerned with merely performing hits, whether they were his hits or covers of other people's hit recordings, starting in the early 50s, 50, 51, 52, when he got into the LP phase of life and realized the potential of this platform, where you're not, as in the old 78 days, flipping the disc over to hear the second song. You could put 40 minutes of music programming on an LP. And he saw the opportunity to create themes where one song leads into the other until you have a grand story, a movie on record, basically. And he loved the idea of concept albums. So his career, from being a guy in his mid-30s forward, when he had the power and influence to choose his material, always took these adventures. It wasn't about individual songs. These were projects where you move through 8 or 10 or 12 titles to tell a complete story. And there are an abundant number of these albums. Bless you, my boy. That was more important to Frank than the aforementioned one-shot wonders. It's part of what distinguishes his recording career from most.
Before time gets away from us, we still have about 10 minutes, but I don't want all of this to go and not discuss. Where can we find your show? Why don't you tell our folks the name of the show and where they can listen to it?
I would love to do that. The Sinatra Songbook is on internet radio at metromediaradio.net. We've been there for years and years, and you can find us there today. We air Saturday afternoons at 6 p.m. Eastern and 8 a.m. Eastern on Sunday mornings. So Saturday afternoons at 6 p.m. Eastern, Sunday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern. MetroMediaRadio.net.
And then you're producing this other show with this fabulous talent. Why don't you tell the folks about our show and where we can find it?
Oh, this is my great pleasure. This is a project that is a labor of love between two guys who are nuts about each other and the music of Ella Fitzgerald. And whatever Frank was as a male vocalist to the American Popular Songbook, and to a slightly lesser degree, the world of jazz, Ella Fitzgerald would certainly be his female counterpart, and that is a dead-on equal. Ella is such an engaging presence, so warm and so capable with that musical instrument that she possessed. She told abundant stories on God knows how many albums. I'd have to consult with you on that. But there is such a rich treasury of music on the shelf for us to consult. And if I thought that the question to ask on the Sinatra series is what was all the fuss about, we could do the same thing with Ella, and are doing that right now on the series Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella. I may be a Sinatra expert, but this guy over here is the expert, may I say, on Ella. And I sit there learning from you on this show. And we've done about 10 or 12 hours so far as we're chatting today. And I am learning so much more about the depth of her dimensionality as an artist, whether it is in the studio or in the context of a live concert, which is where I find her particularly exciting. Now I'm a student, and I'm loving that for a change, and you're the teacher, and that's what's happening on our show.
Which we can find on every kind of platform you can think of, Apple Tunes and iTunes and every kind of tunes there is out there for a platform. You can find our show, and if you can't find it, let us know, and we'll make it happen for you. Gary, thank you, Gary. What a great show. Thank you both. We're not done yet, but I appreciate that.
Indeed. Thank you so very much. And Jeff, you're a great host here and on the Ella series that we're doing, Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella. You launched a Facebook page, which I think is marvelous. If you love Ella, you need to know about this.
Geoffrey Mark Plays Ella Facebook page. Please join us there, and you'll learn what we're doing, and you get to hear from Mark and me and all that good stuff.
As you say on the show, I keep wanting to use the term radio, but it's podcast. All it sounds the same, but you keep saying that the page is the natural extension of the program, and I think that's fair to say.
I'm glad you feel that way. Let's spend our last 5 minutes talking about Frank and Ella together, since we've now gone down this path.
Well, wait a second. Let me ask you a question. You're the interviewer, but I have a question for you.
Yes, my friend.
Among the gazillion odd titles that Ella has recorded, if I hate this question, but here, because I love you, here it comes. If you had to pick an album or a song, a particular song that resonates with you from Ella's body of work, what would it be?
As an album, I pick Ella in Berlin because it's a little bit of everything live. You've got things she should have been recording for Verve Records for the last 5 years, but previous to 1960, plus some things that come from the decade years before that, and you have her scatting her brains out, and you have the original Mac the Knife. So as I've said on the show, and I've said to you, if one is listening to anything, and Anthony Giganti, hello Anthony, nice to see you here too. Thanks for watching. Mac the Knife and How High the Moon, taken back to back, I think is the finest 11 or 12 minutes of jazz ever recorded anywhere. But since Ella was so facile with ballads, I'd have to say either Angel Eyes or Body and Soul as a ballad, possibly Something to Live For, but with the Duke Ellington Orchestra as a ballad. It's so hard, folks. You know, Ella's recorded well over 100 albums, and I've listened to every single song 500 times to write the 2 books about her I've done. It is hard to single out one specific thing, but since I do get asked that question occasionally, I have an answer ready for it. It's why I did for both Verve and Decca compilation albums of Ella's, where I chose the songs and wrote the album notes, one of which I was nominated for a Grammy, because I wanted to bring the best of what I felt, not necessarily her biggest hits, but what I felt was her best work. That's the fun of my show and of your show about Mr. Sinatra. We bring out the best of what these people did. And true for Mr. Sinatra, My Way, or Fly Me to the Moon, or New York, New York, which eludes me a little bit. I thought it was a okay show when Liza Minnelli sang it and made it a hit. I was shocked that Mrs. Sinatra even recorded it, or that it became the enormous hit it became. When I listen to that era of Sinatra, the song I love the best is The Gal That Got Away medley with It Never Entered My Mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, that's yeah, his voice isn't all there anymore, but the phrasing is perfection. So we could do another whole show on just the songs you and I like.
Absolutely. When are we doing that?
Well, we should do that when we need to do a show of the 2 of us together. I think that's what we need.
Boy, that's what the world has been waiting for, don't you think?
What the world needs now is Jeff and Mark. But we only have about we have a half minute left for me to say thank you so much. Hey, folks, please tune in and watch or listen to his show about Mr. Sinatra. Listen to our show about Ella. And I thank you, Mark. I love you very much. Our host, Gary Allen, please feel better. Thanks for watching. Thank you, Tom, for being the incredible technical person who puts this all together for us. I'll be back with you next week. I don't know who I'll be back with yet, but I'll be back. We'll
I'll
have
come back.
somebody wonderful. You'll come back. Well, then I'll be happy. Why don't you guys come back too next time on Main Street? This is Geoffrey Marks saying God bless and have a happy